this last part of Makerpalooza is sort of a free-for-all. We have all of the great minds that spoke today with us, and I am going to moderate some questions. I have my own questions, but I would love to ask your questions. So if you put things in that chat box, anything that you're kind of thinking about with technology, if you have questions on how to do something in this COVID world, these are the people to ask. You have all different perspectives here in this group. So feel free. This is a little circle of trust. Ask your questions and we'll answer them. And just to kind of get us started, I was wondering, the makerspace is such a handsy thing that we have created in these makerspaces. What services did you prioritize to make virtual, and how did you do it at your library? And we'll kind of start off with Nick, if you don't mind.
Sure. So, I mean, for us, we wanted kind of a continuity of service. And so when you do that, you tend to start with the most basic. For us, part of it was trying to, while we can't kind of cure the digital gap overnight, it was doing things like making hotspots available, because if we're taking our standard programming, not even our tech programming, and it was suddenly moving online, immediately there was a segment of the population we were cutting out. So just as a pure baseline, it was getting hotspots in the hands of those who needed it as best we could. The need obviously outweighs our ability to provide it. So as a baseline, that was the priority.
Did you do individual hotspots or like giant hotspots for community areas, or both?
Right. So functionally, what we were able to do as quickly as possible was individual hotspots that we lent out, and then doing things like, our wireless was set kind of to mirror our business hours. So we did do some boosters and got it out into the parking lot and stopped it kind of turning off with close of business, because those were the things that we could immediately do. I think going forward, we'd like to do more public-private partnerships and expand internet access, but that's a much slower process. The stuff we could do right away was get the devices in the hands of people, open up kind of the access that we were providing with internet by getting it further out into the community, at least our parking lot, and expanding the hours of operation.
Chad, what were you guys first sort of prioritizing to get out there with technology?
Sort of what Nick already mentioned. So we had a digital inclusion committee that was started like right before the pandemic hit, and so we knew that that's sort of what we needed to work on, was the digital divide, which has been an issue forever. But a lot of times, we thought about it. We've got this company that goes out and provides mobile Wi-Fi hotspots. But the thing is, a lot of these people don't even have computers or devices to connect to the internet. So we decided to do a couple of those Gadget for Good drives, where we collect, and Diana, I think you've donated to it. We collect old gadgets that people just have kind of stored in their closet. And we work with a company called eSmart Recycling, and they either refurbish the old tech or they take like the actual components out and recycle it. And then, was there somebody dancing behind you a minute ago? That was interesting. What was I thinking? I just saw somebody dancing. That was, oh, so then we would recycle the components and then get those devices out to people. So there was quite a few laptops and tablets that were passed out to people, so they could actually do unemployment. They could submit for unemployment benefits. They could actually register to vote. They could do the 2020 census, all that stuff. So yeah, that was really a priority for us.
So those of you who were in the police making workshop, Kathy has shared her geocaching video in the chat, so you can watch that later. Chad, we did have a spatial question. Does it work with Microsoft Teams, or is it going to be sort of the same experience we had with Zoom today?
It would be the same experience. Now, if you used Spaces, which is a different program, you could be in VR and present to people that are in 2 dimensions, if that makes sense. Now, it's interesting when you do something like that. You're having fun. You're in 3D and you're doing all kinds of stuff, interacting with content. But the people that are in 2D, like you guys probably experienced a little while ago, you're like, what's the big deal, But yeah, you could connect that to that. But it doesn't happen as much as you would think.
So, so what do you see? Because unfortunately, I don't see anything getting better in the next 6 months. What services do you look at in the new year that you're going to try and offer or continue offering to people virtually?
Is that for me?
Yeah, we'll start with you.
Oh, okay.
Why not?
Workshops still. I mean, people have, they're still very busy and all that stuff, but it seems like people are making the time now to learn something new. So, webinars are still a big thing for the college in the public library. So we're going to continue doing that. We did start purchasing more ebooks and that kind of thing that, because if you can't go to the library to get the content, you might as well have electronic versions of it. But yeah, I think the workshop, the webinar type of things, we're trying to wrap our head around, how to do more STEM. We're working on a microbit course right now for the Boys and Girls Clubs, and trying to work through their IT. They block everything. It took me 3 trips. This is a little side note, 3 trips to get a Raspberry Pi, what's called an ISS above, which is a Raspberry Pi that connects to the International Space Station. And all it needed to do was connect to their Wi-Fi, and then the Raspberry Pi did all the rest. And it took me 3 trips and conversations with their IT department to get that passed through their firewall. So that's been, it's easy to set up a Zoom meeting and do your thing, but sometimes if you're presenting it to a group, somebody at the Boys and Girls Club, for example, it might be difficult to get past their IT firewalls and all that. So yeah, so the microbit stuff's been pretty cool, but it's tricky, because they're tiny, they're like this big, and to work with students on how to do that stuff. So that's what we're wrapping.
Chad, Chris is showing you why it is locked down. We installed one and it got it running, and then a patron started hacking the TV.
Oh, really? Huh. Yeah, it's you don't work at the Boys and Girls Club, do you? I will say they were very nice, but even the other day we went in, it was such a pain in the butt to even get the microbit app installed. So I'm kind of moving back and forth from the ISS above and the microbit, but even getting the make code stuff to work is still a pain. It's still not fixed. So once we get that working, the Zoom stuff and the connections with the students doing microbit stuff will be pretty easy.
So lots of everybody is agreeing about, you just can't have enough hotspots. I think that this is one of the things that this COVID has really highlighted, is how unequitable Wi-Fi, the internet is in the digital divide. I think people didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned hotspots, but what other maker sort of activities have you been able to, Nick, virtualize and get your users using?
Sure. So actually, one of the pivots we made more recently, and it's reflected in this this conference today, is kind of the take and make, where functionally the virtual is still being paired with somebody taking a physical kit out of the library. And that's something that's worked pretty well for us. So we've been doing some maker crafts. The other move now is we had a lot of 3D printing going on prior to COVID, and we kind of pulled the plug on all of it because it tended to require a lot of contact time. Now that we've become much more comfortable working in a virtual environment, and many of our patrons have had a necessity, we're doing more 3D printing where we can take the actual request, we can review the file, and we can kind of do this type of conferencing together. And that's really opened up new avenues for us.
And to kind of echo Nick and Chad, I see a lot more people doing like the make and takes, where you get something, you go home. Like the local libraries by me have like a recycle bin outside with like little bags, and you just come up, pick up your bag, and you go home. And there's a scheduled time you hop on a Zoom call essentially, and everyone does the craft together. I've seen a lot of people do the Facebook lives, or a lot of live streaming. A lot of libraries are doing, whether that's story hour like they used to, or something along that nature. I'm sure that at some point there's a few services like Movies Anywhere allows screen sharing where you can stream a video and let multiple people watch it. And I anticipate more of those things will become a norm as well, where for at least for like a library style license to screencast a movie or a cartoon or something like that for multiple people.
That's kind of part of the progress of it all too, right? Early on, we were all just figuring it out. And I'm sure some of your programmers that you use maybe weren't thrilled with doing things virtually and slowly kind of warmed to the idea out of economic necessity, right? You kind of had to evolve. So I think even then, the longer we do this, the more comfortable we get, the more professional we can be, the more the environment improves and kind of, starts adjusting to the new reality. And I guess what I always want to point out is, that there's when we were initially in crisis mode, we were all just trying to deliver some form of value and continued communication with the public. But increasingly, you kind of have to look for why are you doing this virtually and how do you make it the best thing it can be? And if I'm doing virtual and I'm going through the library, I want it personalized to me. You kind of got to lean into the technology. We found where it helps us now is we can do our programming much more on the fly because we're really communicating electronically, a lot of e-newsletters, less reliant on print. And so when something is of interest, like we had a really bad storm, guess what? We were able to just do a virtual program on the importance of tree trimming and identifying dangerous trees. And that's something that in the past, we would have had to plan 3-4 months out. And now we can just, go and talk to the tree guy and say, hey, you want to do a Zoom next week?
That's great. That's cool.
That's cool. So make it in the chat room, just trying to follow along. There's lots of conversation about how make and takes are just like the library award of the year. They're very popular. They're Facebook Live. Kathy did coffee painting on there. And I think that's for more for Luli. They want to know if there's going to be some Camtasia training. But Rachel's pointing out that people are craving this something tactile in their hands, and make and takes kind of help you with that, but they're tired of everything being virtual. I know there's a lot of concern in my area about seniors that, they're at home, they haven't done anything, they're very isolated, they're very unsure of this whole Zoom thing. If you really cajole them, they'll come in, but Nicole is saying we hope to get a Netflix like party extension for the anime club that kids can follow in the chat and watch a movie because they miss their friends.
Yeah, those watch parties are really fun, I think. I will say this, and this is mostly just because of staff, but I will say this pandemic has brought my department very close together. We've been doing the virtual stuff for a while because my college, we've been an online, we're a physical school, but we do a lot of online education. So we were ready for it. But what's interesting though is I've been so close with my colleagues now. We never used to see each other. We never used to meet. We're on different campuses. Now we're using Teams and we're working on projects. We did this huge LibGuides thing. We finally switched our authentication systems over to Open Athens, which I'm still working on, by the way, but it's stuff that we never had a chance to do. And now we're doing it as a team, and we never would have done it before. So it's kind of I'm hoping, I keep telling my director, I'm like, I really hope we continue this connective, relationship that we have now. Because it's been wonderful, so I guess it's the silver lining, right?
So with all of this, and some people were talking about issues with IT and stuff earlier, how do you troubleshoot virtual programs? Chad, we'll give it to you.
Yeah. I usually just ask like Brian to figure out the audio stuff for me. And then I just hang out and I'm playing around with the objects. And yeah, you have to roll your sleeves up and not get frustrated, even though it can be. And Google, if you have an error message, Google the error message. I do that so many times. I'm trying to teach my kids to do that too. And I'm trying to teach my mom that. I've been trying to teach my mom that for I don't know how long.
That's harder than the kids, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it is. And so something pops up and it's an error message and my computer stopped working. Well, what's it say? Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I think
got to be something. I'm like, why don't you Google that message? I guarantee you somebody's fixed it before. Now, obviously, the problem we had today with spatial is probably not a Google tip right now, but if you figured it out, you could probably put something on there, and then it would be somebody else. Yeah.
You know, and I run into the same scenarios as well with people not being able to troubleshoot. And it seems like it's the biggest win I think we can have right now if someone can develop a way to train people how to troubleshoot. Because like we've tried multiple methods. I run a call center as well, and troubleshooting is a skill set that I think lacks for some people. And so I always try to figure out ways to just scenario like none of us are microwave engineers, but if our microwave broke, most of us would be like, all right, I'll unplug it, plug it back in and see what happens. But there's a good chunk of other people that when the microwave breaks, the first thing they do is call the microwave repairman and comes out, unplugs it, plugs it back in, and gives them $100 bill and calls it good. And so I think and again, like when I talked in my keynote, taking problems and turning them into opportunities. Right now, everything right now is a full-fledged opportunity for something. And so if this is a chance for people to build a course around troubleshooting or something like that, perfect. And then I'll buy it because I think it's a good sell point.
And I think it's also just teaching people patience and taking that deep breath and going, okay, that didn't work.
Yeah. And I mean, the whole STEM movement, in my opinion, I always tell people, look, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a mathematician or an engineer or any of that stuff, but I do have a genuine curiosity about things, and I have a desire to figure things out. So if you want to start a STEM program and all that stuff, but you don't have the desire to figure things out or to troubleshoot or to critical think, then you might not want to get into that, because that's pretty much all it is. And that's what
I just want to stop and share what Nicole is doing, because I think this is just the most awesome program I've ever heard of. For elderly folks, she's heard about libraries doing programs so they pair children and seniors with either pen pals or Skype programs. And one that's been really successful for teens is connecting them to nursing home people who speak the language they're trying to learn. So then the student can continue learning the language, and the person at the nursing home has someone to talk to. So I think that's I love that idea.
Yeah, definitely.
The reverse of what we were doing before, where we had the teens helping with technology. It's kind of going the other way.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, definitely. And I encourage everyone that's watching, take some of these. It may sound scary and not doable, or like, what if we run into issues? Always just give it a try. The worst thing that can happen is it fails, but at least you tried. Is the motto.
Good advice.
That's great. So,
I mean, a lot of this too is, our job is always to identify the need and then fill in the gap. And, I'm looking at the chat, and at least part of the concern is that increasingly people are craving human connection. And so while you may still be stuck in a virtual environment, right, because the first thing we owe our patrons and staff is safety, then your challenge is, how do I deliver human connection via, whether it's Skype or whether it's Zoom? And that's where you look and adapt, kind of like what was outlined with that almost digital pen pals. So that's kind of your challenge. So see the need and then kind of figure out how, given the limitations, how you meet that need.
Kathy, that is definitely, management is always going to sort of veer into that side. I think, you could do background checks, you could do stuff like that if you wanted to have people do that. There's a lot of agencies that will run those checks for you, and you might be able to even partner up with the sheriff's department if that would put your management people's mind at ease.
Yeah, it always bums me out when I see stuff like that, because it sounds like it's an excuse not to try something. Like, I mean, that's at one extreme, but the other ones are, what if someone steals it? Well, the chances of something being stolen is pretty slim. And like so I used to work at a library. One of the big concerns when we did our makerspace, before makerspace was a thing, was what if someone steals the stuff? I was like, okay, what if someone steals a book? Do we not have books then? And so it's always a challenge when that, and it always like breaks my heart when I see people tell me, oh, we can't do something because of this 1% chance, or we had to stop the program that everyone loved because one person said they didn't like it.
A lot of times too, it's that the platform is unfamiliar. It's the same old problem. You know, you're not supposed to talk to strangers, and we all know that. But then we'll go and use Uber and just have a random person
Get in their car,
swing by, and
and
we
hope
get
for
in
the
their
best.
car and we go somewhere. You know, so it's
What's weird about the whole don't talk to strangers thing though is like there's times where I talk to a stranger and I meet somebody new and it's a way to connect with somebody, you know. So I mean, I get your point, Nick, for sure. Like you don't want your kids to talk to you, but there's sometimes where I'm like, you know, when you do the pay it forward or something like that's cool, and you're talking to a stranger. It's nice.
Marcia pointed out Santa Claus in the chat box is kind of a stranger.
Yeah.
You know, and I often think when people are reluctant to circulate technology because of that is some of the books that we circulate are more expensive than the technologies that we're circulating. You know, and your fear is, oh, it's a technology, but you know, you send out an $80 book or $100 book sometimes without a second thought.
Or video, like some of those DVDs are expensive too. Yeah.
And to backtrack slightly, someone mentioned about Netflix watch parties. I use Plex. It's a open source platform where you can load up your own videos and content. So if you wanted to do a watch party and you had the digital rights to a movie and you can host that movie on your Plex server, you can then let people sign up with an account and you can all watch everything together, which is, they don't have to pay whatever. Netflix is going up again. I don't even know what it is, almost $20 now for Netflix. So
yep. And Rachel's pointing out Playways and audiobooks are expensive too. Yeah, exactly. So what other kind of, we've kind of touched on lending out technology. What kind of, are you guys circulating technology that you weren't doing before to just get it out there? Or are you mostly doing virtual, like what you are with 3D printing, where you're having them bring the content to you?
You know, I mean, speaking personally, we repurposed a lot of tech that was meant to stay in-house, more so for a work from home environment. So it kind of meant repurposing a bunch of iPads and putting a mobile device management solution on them. So folks could in fact record their virtual programs. That's really been our challenge. We haven't really added a ton of new tech outside of hotspots to get in patron hands.
Yeah, we haven't really done too much loaning of that kind of stuff. I mean, I did bring a 3D printer home so I could print some PPE when it first came up. But yeah, didn't loan much.
So Nicole is adding that copyright has been a big issue for them, especially with the rights to read books. And that has been kind of all over the place. Kathleen's agreeing. Because at first all the publishers were like, use our books, but that's kind of fading away.
Yeah, I always thought about, that's a good point, because I thought about that because when the pandemic first hit, you know, all these database vendors are like, hey, you can have free access to this stuff. And I'm like, that's cool. But when are they going to be like, hey, give us some money?
Exactly.
And then you get your clients, you know, your users are so addicted to this source now, whatever it is. And now they're going to either say, well, for 50% off, we'll give you that now. It's like, well, yeah, I'm sure that's happening.
Yep. Kathy's saying our libraries circulate Cricut Joys with an iPad mini as a craft kit. That's a great idea.
That is.
And Amy Jane is saying our tech kits have gone to staff to whoever, I'm not going to say to whoever. And we've offered to loan other kits, 3D pens, VR to Parks and Rec. They have different requirements based upon the platform you use. I took everything that was under $50 from our Makerspace program and put them in a Steam box for checkout. They'll be pulling more to make more boxes. That's a great idea, Crystal.
I do think we've seen a lot of red kit tape actually get cut in the pandemic. You know, you kind of discover what is important and what seemed arbitrary. I know for us, we loosened, you know, the card application process, really allowed digital sign up of library cards, a real move towards fine free. You see a lot of this, that suddenly things that seemed important previously, not so much. And you may see that with some of your lending tech and what you were comfortable with going out the door in the past.
I agree with that. Even on the government side too. I get to be on a couple of different projects, like with the whole COVID thing. So one of them was the development of like ventilator tubes. So if you wanted to build a maker, this would be a really cool program. But if you wanted to build your own ventilator kit or figure out how to do your own COVID rapid testing, and you have the technical know-how or know someone that knows the walk and the talk, the CDC, FDA, all of them, it's a 48-hour approval process now. It used to be 6 months, and it's now 48 hours, which leads to lots of debate on how accurate some of those things are. But the point is, though, that like even like on that level, like stuff that we're sharing with people, it's a 48-hour recovery time to, yay or nay, you can give this out to the general public. And so with that in mind too, that a lot of red tape, even stuff on that level has been cut, which gives people better opportunities.
So Renee is adding that they have hands-on learning kits for checkout that are the cheaper technology. And Nicole's saying that they're going to do interactive movie kits that check out certain titles that might make it passive make and takes. STEM kits for young kids like cooking, science, laundry, and stuff like that. And Amy's adding that she thinks smaller library systems have been able to adapt better to the pandemic. Larger systems run by larger agencies seem to have a lot of process and red tape that's difficult to get through. So just trying to be a little more optimistic and fun and looking past all of this, because I need my sanity to be based upon that by next summer we'll be almost back to normal. What services that have you digitized or think libraries have digitized is not going to go away? That is a new thing that people are going to want and they're going to demand. Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah. I guess I'll start. Is that okay?
Yeah.
No, it's not.
You know what? You can do a rebuttal right afterwards. Okay.
I'll just say it's wrong.
Well,
Wrong.
to me, virtual programs are here to stay. Now, in some cases, I think we know that we've attracted a new audience that maybe previously weren't taking advantage of library services, and now they're able to. And some folks maybe that were traditional users found it a convenience. And so, I guess part of what we're going to have to figure out is, do you do virtual programs just with the virtual audience in mind? Do you find some middle ground where you're recording your physical programs that are happening in person, and then giving that as an optional, way to view? But I do think that once you've proven that you can do a thing, our board meetings are virtual. And now that people can have the convenience of watching from home rather than coming to the library, you can't go and make the argument that it's not technically feasible anymore, right? And that's something that 21st century, what do people expect? They expect convenience. And so we found ways to deliver convenience. I don't know that you can easily yank it back, but much like the ebooks and print materials, there's a yin and yang, and you have to figure out what the proper balance is. You're going to end up doing that with your programming.
Yeah, and
now the dissent.
Yeah. No, and to piggyback Nick, like the at least in education, it's called high flex, where you can have a physical in-person session, class, or whatnot, and then it's also recorded with fancy cameras. Obviously, the library doesn't go that extreme, but it's then recorded and broadcasted live as well, so people remotely can participate. And yeah, 100%, I would think that the virtual programs are here to stay. Like it'll be silly to take it away because it's opened up a whole new market. Go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, and we were working on an esports / gaming conference, and we were going to have it on my campus. And then, of course, it was supposed to be because the Super Bowl is in Tampa, Florida this year. So, and the guy I'm working with has got tons of connections with esports people that are actually like pro football players and whatnot. So, the thing is now we're going to do it completely virtual, which is smart because, it's by February, we're still going to be living in this COVID. What's cool is we're using a program called Decentraland, and it's based off blockchain too. So you have to so our students are going to learn about career opportunities in esports and gaming, because we know there's a lot of opportunities that they might not know exist. And then we're also going to be teaching them all about blockchain, so there's game pieces and there's certain parts of Decentraland where you have to have some kind of a coin to get in. So it's kind of I'm really excited about it actually. But it's going to be 100% virtual. We're going to be streaming it to different sites. So yeah, I think what Nick said and what Brian said, people are going to really expect it now. And so, yeah, it's definitely not going away.
There's the wider world as well. We're pretty fortunate. We don't tend to fight people too much on mask compliance or anything like that. And part of that is it's just how things are in New York right now. So somebody walks into the library, it's not like usually libraries, we're the ones with the weird rules and the things that seem arbitrary.
Yeah.
And now the library is just doing what the outside world is doing. And so, we found folks kind of having that expectation of how things work. And now if I'm a shopper or I'm somebody that's, out in society, there's certain things that, the business world has adopted that I expect now the library to do as well. And, folks are going touchless now. You see much more touchless payment, keyless access, those types of things that's the next step for us.
I read a lot about, there was all of these businesses were putting in these touch pads when you came in so you could order your food, and how all of that's going away and it's going to be app so that you're not touching the dirty screen that 700 other people touched.
We had done a full biometric access project at my library, including a cafe that you could pay with thumbprint. I would say we went live with that in February. So if you want to talk about timing.
Oh, God.
And so obviously cafe's on hold now for the time being, but we just did like everything, we adapted. And so we put in RFID boosters on things. So now you can just get in with your name tag. We had done biometrics so you couldn't forget your name tag, but at least now you have two options.
Kathy's adding, they don't take cash at all at her library now. And Rachel's saying that's why she hates to get gas because of the gross touch screen. And I keep a touch pen with me all the time. It's one of the things that I realized that this whole thing has made me is more aware of things that we were doing all the time that really, when you thought about it, was like, yeah, that is kind of gross that we were all touching the same screen. So
I had somebody that all of a sudden they recognized the horror in as a children's librarian collecting toilet paper rolls for all these years. So it was like this terrible moment of realization.
that would be a horrific realization. Kathy says fines are paid with food for the food pantry, and anything larger has to be a credit card. Now everybody is going to be traumatized.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That wasn't part of the kit that got mailed out, right?
No.
Okay.
Actually, last year's Makerpalooza, we had, was it last year's? We had toilet paper rolls, but I bought them. I did not recycle them. I bought just the rolls. Amazon just sells a big bag of those.
And if we're on the topic of supply, like the other interesting thing that I think will occur soon is like supply chain logistics are all still very, very messed up. It's one of the huge problems that no one really knows what's going on. But once the vaccine tries to even more mass produce, the supplies needed are rare. Like even if we're talking about like the current vaccine, I think needs to be stored at like negative 94 degrees, and there's only a set of specific freezers that can go that low. And so anything that impacts the build of those freezers, that supply dwindles, which means other coils or whatnot that are required to build your headsets. You're going to see less and less headsets because those coils are being used to build giant refrigeration units. And so like with that in mind, it might be important to start thinking about how can our library either like I want Nick to share his story about the 3D printing thing. I think that's still phenomenal. But like what other things can the library do to help augment that supply chain problem, or at least explain what it is?
So Nick, do you want to share that story real quick about 3D printing?
Oh, sure. So, again, I'm in New York, and, when this pandemic hit, we kind of got punched in the mouth pretty early before I think really folks figured out the severity of things. So we had shut down in mid-March, And I mean, things turned pretty quick where we were closed. They're building like a hospital out on a field at Stony Brook University. And, you know, you got the HMS Comfort is like pulling into New York Harbor. So things got very crazy and there was a real PPE shortage. And so this was actually a partnership between the Suffolk Cooperative Library System, which South Huntington, where I work, is a part of, and actually Stony Brook University, who obviously is closely affiliated with the university hospital as well. Um, they have their own makerspace as well. And talk about supply chain, what we were able to do was take a schematic that was approved and 3D print PPE, namely face shields, for frontline healthcare workers. And the nice part was we were able to take a model that went through Stony Brook's makerspace in consultation with the hospital. Um, and then we would print out the parts. It would go to Stony Brook, be assembled there, and had the quality assurance and went directly to the frontline healthcare workers. So it was kind of the best case scenario. We had all been closed. Collaboratively, we sent about 75 3D printers together into a print farm and created over 5,000 face shields
Wow,
fairly quickly.
that's pretty amazing.
And you know, with this, with the virus thing, we know that obviously there's a lot of bad information out there, and as the, you know, vaccine starts coming out, I think that's going to be part of meeting the informational needs again of the public too. Is, you know, don't get that back alley vaccine that somebody says they can give you for $20. You
Yeah,
know, we've been, anybody who's done a flu clinic, you know that we've been involved in this process for a long time.
Rachel's saying at their library they sewed April and May that the library sewed a lot of masks they give away to the county. So I do think libraries really stepped up in that time. I have a couple just kind of more laid back kind of fun questions to kind of envision a time past all of this. Where do you see the library experience in 2025?
I know.
I'm going to make Brian answer this first because he looks most panicked.
There you go.
No, I'd say it's probably going to be fairly similar. Maybe not as so. I've always preached to people since the thing began, like the idea of keeping things clean, which is a shock. It seems like we have been missing the mark for years. Of like, you know, oh, we should probably wipe down high touch surface areas. Like, yeah, you probably should have done that during every flu season too. And so I'm hopeful that we've learned a lot of really valuable lessons. And then those lessons, even though it sounds like a pain, like, oh, now I gotta wipe down those biometric chips that Nick wanted to have in our library because, you know, I saw someone cough today and it's, you know, March and it's 2029. But I think I'm hopeful that we keep these standards in place because they're good standards to have. If you're sick, you stay home. If during any type of sick season, keep things clean. But I think by 2025, I think people think, somebody mentioned about technology earlier about being very expensive. And I always like to look back at televisions, those big screen TVs. Remember, like, in order to have a big TV, it was thousands of dollars. And I bought my mom for Christmas a 65-inch TV for $200. So like, things have gone down. Or we talk about 3D printing. I think the cheapest
$200. I think that was stolen, Brian.
No, it was $200 from Walmart. It was like all right, all the boxes were really beat up, but it was a legit sale at Walmart. And I was like, they were like 280 something, 230 something. And I was like, those are only $200. The guy's like, yeah. I'm like, done. Christmas is complete. But the point is, the sale of, or the cost of these products have gone down drastically, and because of, once we get out of this supply chain influx, that's why I mentioned it earlier. Things are slightly going to drop as fast right now. But 3D printing was $3,000 for the MakerBot, was one of the first 3D printer out. Now you can get a 3D printer that prints way better for $200-300. Talking about VR, AR headsets, I'm sure Chad can probably elaborate more on that. But the cost of the headsets when things first came out were in the thousands, plus a $1,000 computer, plus everything else. But now you can get a headset with everything in it for $300. And so by 2025, more people will be everyone will be wearing something like this, because it'll just be the norm. The cost of cell phones, with the exception of Apple, has gone down year over year.
I think a couple of people in the chat box mentioned Japan. We were in Japan 2 years ago, and it was one of the things that was shocking to us is people just wore face masks. If you feel good, you put a face mask on for the day, and that is just what you did. So I do think like that, like you're saying, that these lessons hopefully will stick with us. Nick, Chad, do you have anything to add?
Well, I'm just going to say by 2025, I don't see there being much of a change, to be honest. I think, I hate to say this, but I think libraries, generally speaking, are slow to adapt. Not in the pandemic case, of course. I mean, I think everybody adapted fairly quickly. But typically, though, I think, we're not going to see that much of a difference, I don't think. Now, yeah, go ahead.
No, I look at it as
going to be more optimistic than you two. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, yeah, first off, I'm not going to steal this TV from my grandma ever. But beyond that, I just feel like the pandemic really what it did is accelerate trends that were already happening. And so, now ebooks, all of a sudden, people are like, oh, what about these? This isn't a new thing. This was a shift that was happening for a long time. But now I think we all kind of had to throw away our 5-year plan and rapidly invest in things like our digital media. We all talked about doing more, virtual things, and we were forced into it. We were forced into using collaborative workspaces. We all talked about, since Web 2.0, we talked about, hey, Google Docs, and now all of a sudden everybody lives with Google Docs out of necessity. So that to me is going to be, 2025, we're going to be continuing and more so using collaborative environments. We're going to be more invested in digital collections, and hopefully, there's no avoiding the digital divide, because now we've been forced into a digital space, and this is like closing the door to a lot of people. I also expect a lot of places to go fine free. Right now, we're making the argument that if I'm somebody who is lower income, I may not have internet access. So ebooks aren't a thing for me. And then if I'm trying to borrow physical materials, I run the risk of accruing a fine in a way that I can't with digital content. You can't, well, you can if you turn off if you go in airplane mode, you can steal ebooks. Sorry. But
you're talking to the librarians. We all know that.
We all know that. I just, I felt the need after Brian stole the TV to kind of show that. Yeah, I'm hardcore too. But really, so if I'm lower income, I can't afford internet access. I'm already cut off from the library's digital content. And now I'm forced to borrow the only content that actually still accrues fines. And I'm most at risk of not being able to meet that. That's mostly punitive for people who can't afford it. So that's the other expectation. I think this is a big push, again, to accelerate a trend that's been going on for some time.
Yeah. I also want to just say about funding is going to be an issue too. I think, we're saving money in a way because we're not running air conditioning all the time now. I know the colleges, we've shut a lot of our buildings down, but we're also losing a lot of funding at the state level. And I think in 2025, it doesn't matter who is in office, it's going to be difficult. And we all know that our governor, DeSantis, did that line item veto, which cut pretty much everything for academic libraries and for for everybody. And he did not realize what he did. And that was scary. And especially if you work in academic libraries, I was sick to my stomach because a lot of my friends are in Tallahassee, and I thought a lot of them were going to lose their jobs. The Florida Library Virtual Campus is a big part of how we gain access to all of our electronic resources, how we get authentication, everything. They were going to be gone, completely gone, because of this idiotic line item veto that he didn't know what he was doing. And so I think all of us need to be pretty aware of what's going on and make sure, we're just at least paying attention, because it's going to get worse. Imagine if nobody, caught what was going on, FLVC would be gone.
Well, that's and the MLCs and a lot of other organizations.
Oh yeah, TBLC, all of them. Yeah, it was a disaster.
So we're running towards the top of the hour. So I just want to ask one question that you three can't turn into something depressing. No. What's your first of all, Chad, I want to know, when is VR going to be commonplace? Right now it's sort of a niche thing still. When is it going to be just mainstream?
I don't know if it's ever going to be mainstream. I mean, I know Facebook purchased it years ago, Oculus, I'm just using one example, to try to make it more mainstream. You know, I don't know if it's ever going to be mainstream, to be honest. I don't really know. I can't see us all wearing headsets and walking around in a virtual room. Like today proved that, you know?
But potentially, if everyone's wearing the headsets, then you'll eliminate some of those problems as people are jumping between Zoom and spatial. If it's the standard status quo because everyone's doing it, like cell phones, like everyone, I shouldn't say everyone, but everyone texts each other nowadays. But
I feel like they get the headsets where they're not feeling.
But they got glasses coming out that looks like Chad's glasses that'll do the same thing in a few years.
Yeah. I still don't know if it's going to become mainstream though. It's sort of like gaming in a way. I mean, gaming's huge industry, but how many of you play games, video games? So when I think of it as kind of, you know, like a film experience almost, you know? So I don't know. I mean, for me, it's mainstream. I mean, I'm using it. A lot of my friends are using it. But I think the majority of people it's going to be a while.
Nick, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I just, you know, with VR, we're creatures of convenience. And so we'll do a thing when it's convenient. Now, VR is making headway in terms of convenience, right? You don't have to be anchored to a computer anymore. And like everything, it's getting faster, lighter, cheaper. You know, and as Chad mentioned now with Facebook believes that the future of virtual reality is social. In their opinion, you're going to be doing a watch party, but you're going to be at a stadium virtually sitting next to somebody watching the Knicks play, you know, maybe not the Knicks. I mean, it's been a tough decade or two. But yeah, and you know, that's partially why Facebook is trying to force the hand there by, you know, now you requiring a Facebook account functionally for at least at 2021 at some point, they're going to force that. They need a Facebook account.
That might change, by the way. Their the lawsuit that's going on with Facebook.
Well, there's that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they may be blown into 3 or 4 pieces anyways when it's all said and done. But you know, that's part of it. And then the other piece that's moving towards AR, VR is functionally that, you know, all of our phones suddenly became a platform that's can by default be an AR, VR device. So once, you know, the iPhone says they can do it, all of a sudden, guess what? 100 million people suddenly are potential VR, AR users. So I'm a little more positive on it, although it's easy to see a trend and think that it's going to be, I mean, we mentioned MakerBot. I remember when MakerBot first came out, they thought they were 3 to 5 years from everybody having a 3D printer at home. Now, obviously that didn't happen. It's still, to me, there's a convenience there, and I think that you'll get there eventually, but not as quickly as we think.
I think we almost need to define mainstream too, you know?
I don't think there's a mainstream as much anymore. Everybody is.
Yeah, it's so
different.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So there's been some great comments in the chat room. I just want to mention, Nicole's saying the big trend they see is combining more social services with library services. Lots of discussion about fine free as well. And VR reminds them of people in the movie WALL-E, and also just seeing the number of movies that show what it might be like to normalize mainstream VR. As that continues to grow, it just sort of becomes more of our culture and people accept it a little bit more. And Catherine mentioned Altered Carbon on Netflix, Black Mirror, Ready Player One, VR Like Gamer, and Surrogates are all examples of that. So I just want to leave with one final question for all of you. What is your favorite tech right now? If I had to tell you, you had to lose it all except for one thing, what would you?
For me, I love VR. So that's for me. I love being in.
We know, Chad. We know.
I mean, reality is great and all, but sometimes it's nice to get away from it all, right? And by the way, VR has been around since like forever. It's not a new thing.
Amy Jane is mentioning that it's hard to talk about all of this advanced technology when internet access and the digital divide exists so badly. And I do think that it needs to be a utility. I totally agree with that, where just everybody has it, at least at some level. You know, just like you have water coming to your house and you have power coming to your house. Okay, so Chad is VR. Brian?
Oh yeah, I'm thinking because I was going to do VR, but I don't want to take up Chad's VR space because he'll be like, no, Brian, you're in the physical world. This is my domain.
No, you should hang out with me in VR more often, man.
Oh, then you'll hang out with me. Okay, I'll note that down.
Well, see, you're in Chicago. I'm in,
That's true.
So we can.
I'm a FaceTime call away.
Yeah, but the social VR thing is I think
it is.
It's
I
great.
agree.
Great, I love that.
For me, I think anything with an AI component is going to be is like my favorite tool. So like robotics with AI, where you can have conversations and not like the decision tree AI that most people see, like when you chat in for customer support. It's decision tree. It's the chatbot reads a question, goes, "Oh, I have this answer. I'm not going to understand what you're asking." But I'm talking about like real AI where you can have like conversations and stuff. So Maslow is one of those that I think is really cool because it's an empathy driven AI. So I would say AI is a technology, not necessarily a product, but yeah.
Nick?
You know, I'm a big fan of 3D printing, just because I see it as kind of this Swiss Army knife type of technology that really adapts to whatever the present need is. So, you know, 1 minute we're printing out PPE, the next minute we need a trophy for, you know, a trivia night, and we can go and print that and customize it. Or a part breaks and we're able to do that, or somebody needs a prototype. So that's, to me, I mean, a tech that's so flexible, and it doesn't, you know, we think of it as high tech, but I've seen it used, you know, very low tech. I had somebody that needed a new pasta maker, you know, the old school kind of like fork thing that you make the specialized gnocchi. We're able to replicate that with food safe filament. So I kind of like that one where it rises to the challenge depending on what we're looking to do.
Completely. As Nicole pointed out, we can even do a house these days, which is pretty amazing. Catherine, you're mentioning the digital divide. There's a library in Pennsylvania that does something called Wi-Fi in the park. If you want to Google that, they actually build extenders out into the parks to provide Wi-Fi through communities that did not have it in their area, which was a pretty neat project. So, Luli, are you still here? We're down to just a moment if you want to say goodbye. I'm not sure if she's...
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Of course I am. I'm very enthralled. Like I said, not the kind of stuff that, you know, I'm familiar with, not my stuff, but I love it very much. And I'd like to thank everyone from Brian and Nick and Chad and Diana. Gosh, I feel like Miss Nancy on Romper Room for those of us that are that old. And everybody that attended today, thank you so much for working with us and you know, going through the challenges of the day and just for being our guinea pigs. I hope that you enjoyed it. I missed everyone personally this year that came to Makerpalooza in the past in person, but I'm also thrilled that in spite of that, because we're online, we have been able to reach so many people outside of the Swiftland area and include so many parts of the entire state of Florida in today's training. Thank you so much for your support of Swiftland. Thank you for everything that you do to keep us working and enthusiastic about what it is that we do for all of you. And I'd like to also take this opportunity to wish you all a wonderful holiday season, whatever holiday it is that you celebrate at this time. We hope that it's a wonderful time for you and your families, however you're able to do it, and that 2021 allows us the opportunity to gather again together in a face-to-face format that we miss so much. Thank you very much. Swiftland staff sends you their regards as well. And please be on the lookout for your friendly survey about today's event. And we would like for you, of course, to be brutally honest. Don't just tell us what you think we want to hear. We want to know what worked, what didn't work. Please don't mention the food and the fact that we didn't have water bottles for you at break time, because we already know that. But please be brutally honest. Let us know how we can do better. Let us know what you enjoyed, what was frustrating, and we hope to do things better so that it's a wonderful event for everybody, and that's something that you look forward to.